Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, thank you for joining us today and tomorrow for this critical discussion focused on science, technology, and innovation, the Sustainable Development Goals in an era of COVID. 5 years ago, world leaders gathered to adopt the ambitious and expansive Sustainable Development Goals. Science, technology, and innovation were placed into the center of this effort. In fact, this was to be the week for the annual UN Science, Technology, and Innovation Forum, one pillar of STI for SDGs. And with 10 years to go to 2030, the target date for the SDGs, there was always much to do. Of course, this was the case before the COVID pandemic took hold. It is amplified with even more critical understanding in today's world. In fact, today, we are all adapting to a new world. Rather than meeting in person, we are gathered around the world. And while our focus is COVID, science, technology, and innovation are more important than ever, both to solve today's challenge, but also and critically, to set us along a path in the 21st century that will lead us to the 17 goals and a better course of life. This is why this gathering today and tomorrow is so important. We will have 7 sessions in total, including panels on the science of COVID, technology and innovation to address COVID, rethinking science, technology, and innovation for the Sustainable Development Goals, and the future of global science and technology cooperation. We are pleased to be co-organizing this conference with the permanent missions to the United Nations of Ghana and Israel, the 2 STI co-chairs actually for this year, Mexico, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Singapore, Barbados, Japan, and Rwanda, and the Office of the Special Advisor to the United Nations for Digital. We are in fact honored that throughout this conference, we will hear from their ambassadors and other national officials and UN officials on these critical issues and their perspectives, both in their remarks and in their interventions. We also look forward to having written questions to panelists from the webinar participants. We indeed actually have one of the most expert group of panelists across all of the different fields we mentioned, and it's a wonderful opportunity to actually have a truly global and diverse conversation about this critical issue set. It is now my pleasure as chair of this first and opening session to turn the floor over to one of the co-chairs of this year's STI Forum, the permanent representative from Israel, Ambassador Danon. Ambassador Danon, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Turekian, and welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see my colleagues. I wish we could meet in person, and hopefully we'll be able to do it very soon. I want to thank the co-chairman, Ambassador of Ghana, Martha, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today for this unique and special conference. And I'm happy that we overcame all the challenges and all the obstacles, and here we are today. Dear friends, COVID-19 does not distinguish between peoples or recognize borders. And as we face the pandemic globally, we have to fight it together. The response to the pandemic must be a global one that is based on shared dialogue, solidarity, and increased international cooperation. I'm happy that today we are actually proving it, and we are able to host an event that embodies just that. We are proud to lead this inclusive and diverse event together with missions of Ghana, Mexico, Singapore, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Barbados, Japan, Rwanda, and Kenya. I would especially like to thank Special Advisor to the Secretary General Fabrizio Hochschild Ramón and the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine for all their invaluable help in making this event a special event. There were many obstacles that stood in the way of holding this conference today, and I'm glad that together we were able to overcome all of them. STI are the keys to overcoming the current crisis and for preparing ourselves against and perhaps even prevent future pandemics. At this point of the pandemic, we feel that we are starting to move to reopen our economies, and that's why, especially today, STI is crucial for allowing individuals and governments to adequately and responsibly manage risk. In order for all of us to feel safe, we have to allow people to return to their life. We need accessible tools that can prevent people from being exposed to the virus. We need tools that can let people know if they have been exposed so they can know how to handle it. Israel, as a leader in STI, has already found ways to apply our technology and knowledge into those fields to fight the pandemic and manage the crisis. I want to share with you one example with one application. We call it in Hebrew Amagen. In Hebrew, it's called the Shield. This app was developed a few weeks after the pandemic erupted, and this app cross-checks the GPS history of a user's mobile phone with historical geographic data of patients from the Ministry of Health database and alerts them immediately if they have been in the presence of anyone who has been diagnosed with the coronavirus. The GPS data does not leave the mobile phone, as the cross-referencing of the GPS history with the locations happens on the user's phone. And that's how it assures the security, the privacy of their information. So whenever you left your house and you are exposed, you will be notified immediately via a text message from the government that will let you know when it happened, and you will be able to monitor it. The code for the app is open globally, and it creates transparency and encourages cooperation between programmers in Israel and all around the world. This is a way to work together and to allow us to go back to normal life. This was just one example of the way that we can apply STI to secure, accessible, and collaborative manner, and to help us put an end to this pandemic and people's lives back on track. We hope to hear more ideas over the next 2 days. I'm sure we will hear great ideas. We will be honored to have Professor Ada Yonat and Dr. Kira Radinsky from Israel with us today. I look forward to hearing their insights, as well as the insights of our other esteemed panelists from all around the world. I would like to commend the UN, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, for the insights they provided in their cooperation in science and technology policy paper. To conclude, I would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm Israel's commitment to and solidarity with all countries as they fight this pandemic, and to send the best wishes and prayers to the people who have been affected by the pandemic and to their families. Together, we will overcome this pandemic. Together, we will prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I will now turn the floor to the permanent representative from Ghana, Ambassador Martha Pobee, the other STI co-chair for this year.
Excellent, dear participants. At the outset, I join Ambassador Danon in expressing appreciation to colleague permanent representatives of Barbados, Czech Republic, Estonia, Japan, Kenya, Mexico, Rwanda, and Singapore for their partnership in organizing this side event. I also wish to thank the 10-member expert group appointed by the Secretary General to support the technology facilitation mechanism, and the UN Office for Digital Cooperation for their collaboration in putting the program together. The COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked a devastating impact across the globe, with unprecedented challenges for all countries, large and small. We continue to witness the horrific loss of human lives and debilitating effects on the global economy and livelihoods, even in the most advanced countries. It is gratifying, therefore, that in spite of the obvious challenges, we are able to convene virtually to deliberate on the important subject of the role of science, technology, and innovation in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and in advancing progress towards the implementation of the SDGs. In the next 2 days, we will explore ideas on how to pull together knowledge, expertise, best practices, and scientific and technological resources in national and global efforts, and what we need to do to build partnerships between governments, academia, and the private sector in subsequent recovery efforts. There is no denying that Through collaborative global research and innovation, we can find science-based solutions to address the various dimensions of the current health crisis. In the immediate term, we need to find vaccines and therapeutic treatments, as well as ensure adequate medical supplies and tests to suppress the transmission of the disease across the globe. Medium to long-term responses and policies should also aim at improving public health systems and at enhancing international collaboration in the management of global health risks. We must also take bold and decisive steps to deal with the humanitarian, social, and economic dimensions of the pandemic. Extraordinary times often call for extraordinary measures, and happily, I think we have both the opportunity and the capability to address these wide-ranging ramifications of this health crisis. The surge in the use of innovative technologies, such as we're doing now, video conferencing, remote learning, and e-commerce, has enabled us to ensure business continuity and to overcome disruptions and restrictions. This, I believe, is pointing the way to future applications of technological innovation for the SDGs. Let me share Ghana's experience with the pandemic and how it relates to our subject. Under the direct guidance and leadership of President Akufo-Addo, Ghana has instituted several measures to mitigate the negative impact of the pandemic and, where possible, has applied technological innovation and artificial intelligence to maximum advantage. These include hands-free hand wash equipment and the use of drone technology to deliver COVID-19 test samples from remote parts of the country to research laboratories located in urban centers. This has helped to shorten the time for testing and facilitated prompt identification of new cases, ensured swift contact tracing protocols, and early isolation and treatment of infected people. The government has eased the requirements for mobile money registrations, waived fees on transactions, allowing citizens to use existing mobile phone registrations to open accounts with major digital payment providers, to encourage the use of digital finance as a monetary policy tool, and to reduce infections. This new trend has increased the number of registered mobile money users, reduced the gap in financial inclusion in the country, and reduced physical contact in payment systems, sometimes even at the local markets. Distinguished participants, there is ample reason to believe that the lessons learned during this pandemic can prove beneficial for implementation of the SDGs. The fight against this deadly novel coronavirus provides an opportunity to harness science and the evidence it provides us to inform our decisions and our actions in this decade of action in the implementation of the SDGs. How do we ensure that our collective and national responses to the pandemic are sustained and closely linked to the actions necessary to advance the SDGs? And what steps do we need to take to build back better using the comprehensive framework that the SDGs offer? The effects of the pandemic are already impacting negatively on the prospects of delivering on the goals and targets, and the downturn in the global economy will probably worsen shortfalls in financing the SDGs. The World Bank estimates that the crisis will push some 11 million people into poverty. Already existing inequalities are deepening. Can we hope to achieve the laudable goals by 2030? It is my earnest hope that this event will provide an opportunity for answers to these questions and will provide useful insights on how to master the full complement of resources needed for the SDGs, even in the midst of such global crisis, and help us chart a path to international cooperation and collaboration in science, technology, and innovation for sustainable development. In conclusion, let me say, this year marks the 75th year of the founding of the United Nations. It is an opportune moment to recommit to multilateralism, to address the fundamental weaknesses in our global system, and seek for global solutions to global challenges. International cooperation holds the key to success in our common and shared desire to safeguard our common humanity. I thank you for for participating in this event, and I wish all of us fruitful deliberations. Thank you, Vaughan.
Ambassador, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your leadership on this issue. I would now like to turn the floor over to the Mexican ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Juan Ramón de la Fuente. Ambassador.
Thank you, Vaughan. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, it is a pleasure to join you in this opening session together with my friends and colleagues, Ambassadors Danon of Israel and Martha Pobee of Ghana, and Undersecretary General Fabrizio Hochschild. I'm also very pleased that we have been able to join forces from different corners of the world for today's event. This is the kind of efforts we need to show we keep working together at the UN, with the UN, in these very difficult times. As some of you may know, Mexico has been very active in this field, leading some of the discussions on digital technologies at the UN. We have promoted 2 resolutions on the impact of rapid technological change in the achievement of the SDGs. We have also prompted a thriving group of friends on digital technologies that we co-chair with Finland and Singapore, and soon we will be joined by Rwanda as well, and that has almost 70 members. The pandemic we're facing is a game changer in almost every single aspect of our lives. For instance, it is estimated that at least 172 countries have closed their schools, affecting 1.2 billion of students, to say the least. Many have been able to continue their education through the digital means, the same means, by the way, that have also enabled many of us to keep working from home. However, we shall not forget, this is not the reality for everyone. We have to remind ourselves of the stark fact that half of the world's population remains offline. And this pandemic has confronted us, amongst other things, that bridging the digital gap remains a pending task we need to tackle if we want to keep our promise to leave no one behind. Science is our best ally on the battle against coronavirus and other similar health problems that will come in the future. I have no doubt that international efforts to find a vaccine will succeed at some point in time. The challenge will then be the access to it. And that's why Mexico drafted recently a resolution for the General Assembly on the international cooperation to ensure global access to medicines, vaccines, and medical equipment to face COVID-19. By the way, we are very grateful to the 179 countries that co-sponsored this resolution. But it's not only science, technology, and innovation are also needed to better deal with the virus. Testing is no other than technological tools designed to identify those individuals infected, as are the apps to detect those that may have been infected as well, to trace them so that we can stop the spread. That's where technology and innovation is showing us its enormous advantages. I can think of no better occasion than this to say without any doubt that science is here to guide our decisions, and with the support of technology and innovation, we shall overcome this horrific episode, and we better learn the lesson. Allow me to say a final word on the way forward. Given the magnitude of the transformation COVID-19 will have in our daily lives, the UN needs to be more flexible, to adapt itself, to be more relevant, In the coming weeks, the Secretary General will present his roadmap on digital technology. This is very timely, and I hope it will reflect the new normal and how to better address it. Thank you for joining us today. Enjoy what promises to be a very fruitful discussion, and stay safe.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those remarks. I'll now turn the floor over to Under Secretary General and Special Representative Fabrizio Hochschild for the intervention and the perspective from the United Nations.
Thank you very much, and I'm honored to join such a distinguished group of speakers, and I'd particularly like to congratulate the Ambassador of Israel and of Ghana for leading this initiative. I'd just like to also echo the words of the Ambassador of Mexico. I hope everybody is safe, your loved ones are safe and well. The Secretary General has pointed out that we will get through this through solidarity. And in that spirit, as my token of solidarity, I'd just like to make the point that I removed my tie to show solidarity with those who are not wearing a tie. So I'm doing my bit for solidarity. Please let the Secretary General know. I think key points have already been made. I think if there's one lesson from COVID, our ability to get through COVID, if we have to boil it down to two things, will depend on two things, science and international cooperation. A deficit in respect for science will lead to greater loss of life. A deficit in international cooperation will lead to loss of life. Where international cooperation works and countries come together, lives will be saved. Where the lessons of science are respected, lives will be saved. But that combination of science and international cooperation that in very bold terms is so clearly life-saving or life-threatening where there's a deficit in the case of COVID, is also true for the multiplying number of global challenges we face in an ever more interconnected, ever more interdependent way. Climate change is just, as many have pointed out, if not just as deadly, probably over the longer term, more deadly, more devastating than this pandemic. And again, it can only be overcome through science and international cooperation. In that sense, to host this event today, where we're reminded of the importance of the two, and global cooperation, not just across the borders of states, because the challenges we have today don't recognize state borders, but also across our silos between academia and government, between business and government, between the UN and civil society. We need to get rid of those silos if we're to make real progress. So I think being reminded of that, of the need for those joined up approaches, joined up across stakeholder groups, joined up across borders and science-based, I think that is very, very important, and hence the importance of this event today. The particular area of technology I'm involved in is, of course, digital technology. And digital technology has quite literally been a lifesaver in this pandemic. It's the first pandemic, the first global health crisis we've had in the digital era. And it has allowed us not only to anticipate how this massively rapid spreading virus spreads and to take preventive measures than would ever have been possible in the pre-digital era. It has allowed us, scientists across the world, to work together in ways that would have been impossible in the pre-digital era. And it has allowed us to do the sort of surveillance that is required that allows for much more targeted approaches that can guarantee the freedom of movement of many. So digital technology has helped to guard our right to health. It has helped to guard our right to education. And it has helped us also, or will help us also, to increase our freedom of movement, and of course, also our freedom of speech. But it has also highlighted certain drawbacks. We've seen that as much as digital technology can be used to give very real-time, accurate information on the virus and spread public health messages on an unprecedented scale, it can also be used to spread hatred, disinformation, and stigma on an unprecedented scale. We've seen that it can be a massive boost for the sort of surveillance that allows for very targeted quarantine messages that guarantee freedom of movement for other parts of the population. But we've also seen how it can be used for over-intrusive forms of surveillance. And I think what we're learning is that where surveillance is as useful as it is, has to be anonymized, has to safeguard against inappropriate uses of data, has to be proportionate and time-bound with the public health emergencies. So while the overall help from digital technologies is huge, certain drawbacks are also apparent, and that highlights the need for better global cooperation to boost the positive and to contain the negative. And I must add that the problems I've highlighted are, of course, luxury problems, because there is still half the world, not more than half of all women, over 60% of all women, 80% of people living in the least developed countries who don't have the luxury of those problems because they don't have connectivity. So our first and biggest priority that should come out of this crisis has to be to pursue affordable internet access for all, because without it, the inequalities that are going to come out strengthened from this crisis will be even further strengthened, because those who are not connected do not now have access to jobs, they do not have access to education, they do not have access to the health benefits. So they will be left further behind. And the Secretary General's roadmap that the mentioned, and that many countries and many institutions participated in our work on, will set out a roadmap precisely to try and secure at an expedited speed universal affordable access, because without that, we will not be able to realize the SDGs, but also make sure that that access is safe, secure, and upholds human rights. So I'd like to thank again the organizers for this event, and we look forward to working very closely in our common endeavor to both overcome this crisis, but also to ensure that, as the Secretary General says, what comes after is a more inclusive and better planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Undersecretary General. And thank you to the ambassadors who spoke in this opening session. I think it laid an important groundwork and framework for the fact that this is clearly an issue that has global resonance and requires, as the Undersecretary mentioned, global cooperation, both in the diplomatic realm, but critically also in the science, technology, and innovation realm. So in fact, through the next 2 days, we will hear from a number of experts from around the world who are looking for the role that science, technology, innovation, and policies can play at an international and local scale to address not only COVID, but COVID in the context of a decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which are now 10 years from their target date. So it is my pleasure to close this session now and turn it over to the next session, which will begin to look really at the science of COVID. But before I do want to again recognize the large and massive amounts of help that we've received from a number of different people across the UN system and across the member states who have made this event not only one where we can share information amongst ourselves, but truly make it a global enterprise. And we hope that the participants on the webinar continue to look for ways to engage through questions during the different sessions, because I think this is a really important way to have this kind of exchange in the absence of us all being together at the STI forum this year. So with that, I thank the ambassadors, I thank Undersecretary General, and turn it over to the next panel for the conversation.